we wanted to do was to create the movie from the perspective of the words of her music and how that would inform events in her life.
It takes incredible courage to play somebody so iconic, and what Marissa did so brilliantly was to spin the plate of all the technical requirements of playing Amy, at the same time to spin the other plate of emotional authenticity.
Once you get into our film, you start to see and relearn what it is that made the world fall in love with Amy in the first place, and that's an incredibly joyous story. It's a film through Amy's eyes. Of course, Camden is a main character.
Yeah.
We wanted to show the part of London that not many people know about.
There's no way we could have shot it anywhere else. It has a texture all of its own.
Being in Camden was so essential and a huge part of Amy's life and identity. She really embraced and loved every aspect of it. The fact we could base our world in her world. It felt essential that we had that.
It was her playground, that's what she called it.
Amy had the opportunity to live anywhere she wanted in the world, and she never left Camden.
She really was a Camden girl through and through.
We were very fortunate to film in the real locations that Amy spent some of her life in. We really chose to explore down by the waterways, in the pubs, in sort of the quieter areas that not many people know about.
Yeah, so obviously the good mix of the Dublin Castle. Early on it was said, they were quite key locations. They were like places she hung out.
Amy was often down at the Good Mixer playing pool with whoever was just there that day. So it was important for me to see who those kinds of people were.
I don't imagine a lot has changed in that pub since then. We just felt like we had the setting. Yeah, it's been brilliant. The music that was nurtured here, I just feel like it had its own iconography.
I think people forget about it. I think people forget about the scene that's there.
We're going to show the world a part of London that they've not seen before.
You can't get that on a studio. You just can't.
And it's as much, I think, a love letter to London and to Camden. Telling Amy's story without Camden just doesn't make any sense.
No. When Matt and I originally sat down, we really wanted Back to Black to be the framework within which we told the story. What we did was really sort of set the narrative around each song, how best to serve her in feeling that her music is telling her own story.
Feels more like an insight into how Amy saw the world rather than an insight into how the world sees Amy.
My role in this movie is my title is music producer. I'm sort of overseeing the music in the film and more so working with Marissa on her performance and trying to get the nuance of being what it is to be an Amy Winehouse. If we're going to do this, you have to make a choice when you do a movie like this. You make a choice as, do we use backing tracks or do we use the person that's playing the role?
I think if we'd have dubbed Amy's voice in, there'd have been a disconnect emotionally.
Amy has a voice that's irreplaceable by anyone. What Marissa does is she carries the emotion and she carries the feeling of Amy at that moment.
You try to identify the key features in the sound so that when you listen to it, it reminds you very, very strongly of Amy Winehouse, but it isn't an impression, and that's a really important distinction and quite difficult to pull off, to be honest with you, and I think she's done brilliantly.
I'm never going to have Amy's exact face, so the echo chambers will always be slightly different, but it's about jaw placement and resonance and nasality versus like a chesty voice.
Marissa actually on set is playing the guitar and singing. And the challenge actually for her and the team around is for her to keep Amy's singing up for this length of time. At every point when we worked together, I just thought, you've nailed this.
Very important for us was that Amy's band came back together and recorded the music with Marissa.
Well, there was a thought process that went on before we started recording the tracks of like who's going to record the tracks, and Dale's name came up. I was like, well, why not? I mean, he's a gent, but he's also a great bass player, and the band were great. And the band that played at the Grammys, the band that played at the Grammys when we recorded it.
I got a call to talk about the film and would I want to get involved. I generally say yes to these things because I just want to make sure Amy's represented in the best way possible.
early days, a lot of trepidation of what kind of film we were going to make.
And we were very sensitive to them and saying, you know, are we getting this right? And making sure that we're true to life. And it was really useful to have that spirit of Amy running through this.
For me, it's been somewhat therapeutic. It's amazing. Sometimes when I watch the performances, I feel like I'm performing myself, you know, so it's been wonderful to relive those memories.
Well, I feel like I've gone a full circle because I was in Abbey Road recording when we did Nowhere Boy. So to sort of come back through the doors to be doing another movie and recording it here is quite special for me.
You know, when Dale and the band came in here, they were brilliant, you know. The weird thing was, of course, we can't use them in the film because they're 20 years older.
They asked us to get involved with the stage set, especially with the bass player. I'd have to tell him, don't move, because I never used to.
This film is about a life of love, it's a life of suffering, it's a life of experience, and Marissa's doing that, Marissa's portraying that, and it's so important that she carries on that through in her song performance as well. Otherwise it wouldn't be real.
The tattoos correlated to where she was mentally and the people in her life, and they were such a distinctive part of Amy.
The tattoos were a really good way for us to show passage of time and also consequence of events. So when she gets Daddy's Girl, for example, and when she gets Cynthia and when she gets Blake, they're all very pertinent moments in her life, which then give us a really good sense of where we are in a timeline as well.
The tattoos, like the songs, they're sort of markers of Amy's evolution. It reminds us as well what mattered to Amy. You know, they're huge symbols of how she wanted the world to see her at specific times.
Yeah, it was part of the image, it was part of the whole makeup of her. Maybe it was part of her barrier and protection as well.
Was incredibly helpful for the narrative of our film, which again we're trying to tell through her eyes. So the choices of her tattoos were absolutely in line with the narrative of her music, her songs, and the relationships that she had.
Amy herself was incredibly referential in terms of like how she dressed and made herself up. You can see the references to the Ronettes and to the Shangri-Las.
There's an inordinate amount of behavioural choreography that we had to thread in with 50s, 60s choreography. It's a kind of a very interesting patchwork of all those influences that are coming into Amy and how they manifest in her.
You have these kind of integral roles in Amy's life that shape her into who she was, and that kind of beehive glamorization of the 50s, that all comes from Cynthia and her love and admiration for her.
Amy's real grandma, Cynthia being the main inspiration for Amy's fashion and for Amy's beehive. The engineering feat to sort of keep them up was interesting and made it good fun.
Yeah, what do you call it then? The Winehouse style?
I don't know, it's a bit vintage, isn't it? A bit of an anachronism, aren't I?
Aye.
Our film is like driven by the music, and so Frank Amy is loud prints, colourful, you know, longer lengths in the skirts.
The way that younger Amy holds her spine and her gait, she's a lot more freer in the body.
And it just, to me, encapsulates like who she was at that time, which was like very different to the Back to Black Amy. That was really monochromatic. We stripped everything back and it became quite raw and quite bare.
And then when she makes that choice to change her style, the beehive comes on, we see a shift in her physicality, and so there's this attention that happens in the head and the neck. We lose a lot of the kind of tomboyishness of it, and the attitude, it comes out a little bit, but it's far more kind of held, petite. She's sort of transforming and it bleeds into every part of her life.
I don't wake up in the morning and bang out 10 hits by lunch. I need to live my songs.
The progression for Amy is quite extraordinary, and the main thing that we identified early on is that we were actually going to shoot in reverse, so we had to essentially build her backwards.
It was the first time where I'm costuming someone and their body's changing throughout the filming process. You know, we've got replicas of many of the performance pieces, but I've tried to make sure that the spirit of the item is still in there, even though I've tweaked the design a little bit.
Movement for me was very helpful. If I felt like I could get inside Amy's body and find little mannerisms, they just really click into place. You really start to sense that you have the character then.
It's been an absolute dream working with Marisa. She's hardworking, dedicated. She's a massive perfectionist, and she's always looking for that extra thing that can bring more authenticity to it.
Before I was doing costume design, I was a music stylist. It feels like a dream project to be able to combine the things that I love, about a city that I love, about a woman who means so much, personally and also universally. Yeah, I feel very blessed.
Hope you enjoyed your behind the scenes look. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you here next time. Later.